You're listening to the Faith in Real Life podcast. Here's your host, Greg Wasinski.
Good day and welcome to another edition of the Faith in Real Life podcast, episode 105. Today we're going to talk about starting over. And before I continue on, I just have to say hello to Mrs. Millie Prebel. I met you as a miss, now you're a Mrs.
I am.
How's life treating you?
Great. I'm really excited. This is one of my favorite subjects to talk about.
Yeah, because, we have to do it every day, whether we like it or not.
Absolutely.
And, I had an interesting week just with everything going on in the world. I've had so many conversations and, just talking to people and trying to listen more than I talk, which is a rare thing for me. I mean, you talk for a living, you have to listen, and I think it's been good. I think it's been good to hear different perspectives, not always that what somebody is telling me is going to change my viewpoint or my passions, but just hearing what people are thinking.
Yeah, I think it's always a good conversation to open our lenses a little bit wider to what the world's talking about and what others are talking about, just for from the sense of understanding each other.
Yeah, and understanding is a big thing. And we have to look deeper inside of ourselves for a lot of the answers that we're seeking from other people. And I would say that that's probably one of the biggest ways that people are struggling these days is looking deep inside to figure out what is going on in their own life, why they're struggling, and what is the best thing that they can do to begin to change for themselves.
Right. And I think this has been a great time of us all having to internalize some of those thoughts and beliefs and maybe having some change of heart ourselves.
For sure. I'm going to fix my mic. Do you see it falling?
Let me get a sip of water.
I'm just going to order another one of those. And so let's get right into this subject matter of starting over, because there is this essence that we all need to start over, not only in the way that we think, but in the way that we do recognize others. But for us, we have to be very honest about times that we've fallen and have we have to be very honest about times that we've fallen and had to start over, but each day is a new chance to start over.
Right. And I think this time of life that we've been in has almost forced a lot of us to rethink, our lives, our livelihood, and there's a lot of restarting going on.
There is. And so when I thought about it, because normally I think about when I've messed up, I need to start over. But then I was like, there's been some great athletes who have been at the top of their career and their sport, whatever endeavor it is. And I wanted to say, how many times did they have to start? So arguably one of the greatest sprinters of all time is Usain Bolt. And Usain Bolt started 168 different races. Mm-hmm. That means now he won 156 of them, which is a pretty good record. But that means 168 times he had to start over.
Right.
If we look at Jeff Gordon, one of the best NASCAR racers to ever be on the circuit, 805 career starts. Getting back to that starting line each and every day with the same energy, the same intensity and passion to do what he does. Or even Michael Jordan, 1,072 career games. I would tend to say the same preparation, the same butterfly jitters, everything that it takes to be at the top of what he does. Sure, some days he fell and some days he didn't play great, but it wasn't that people had to have, or people don't need to have some great catastrophe in order to start over, because we do it every day. But how are we looking at the opportunity to play the game in our life? If we've been blessed, that we play it with dignity and also gratitude.
Right. And I think that, it's really important to look to these role models. And one of the things that I looked to, actually on last Monday, I did the Stations of the Cross with a fellow parishioner here, because we have those beautiful outdoor stations.
Yeah.
And she has a reflection on Jesus, the walk of Calvary. So, it's a great example of falling and getting back up, both physically and spiritually. So in her prayer book, she talks about the times that he fell. The first time he fell, it's not to fight against temptation alone, but to bring in your spiritual posse, speak to a spiritual director, a friend or family member, call on Mary and the communion of saints. So don't fight your, spiritual battles and your brokenness on your own.
Well, that gives reference to how we're just playing the game on a daily level, right? I mean, there's the aspects of Jesus falling that each one progressively gets worse.
Right.
And so when we get knocked back a little bit and maybe our ego is hurt or our pride is dented or there's some damage personally, this first time of falling and what you're talking about is, well, who are you letting into your life? Or
Right.
what is your foundation in order to be prepared?
Right. And I think you have to, I've told this to my kids many times, you have to understand who your inner circle is and who your outer circle is, and not to get them mixed up. There's
Right.
very important people that you need to keep in your inner circle, and there's some people that, not that they're not in your life, but they just don't have that love and support and help that you really need in your inner circle. So, bringing others in, Jesus had Simon to help him carry the cross. He had Veronica wiping his brow. So we need to, in our humility and humbleness as we fall, to recognize that, it's time to reach out.
Right.
And I think there's such a stigma against admitting weakness or vulnerability, but only when we humble ourselves and put ourselves before, Jesus at his feet, that's why we're so low, that we can get those gifts and that help from others. What a better thing than, if you've been through a journey to reach out to another and lift them in a
Sure.
journey.
Well, and to be fair, we have to know that not everybody has all the well-rounded gifts that we would hope that they would have. And not that we're going to compartmentalize our supporters or our friends, but there are people that will be there for you to help you move the dresser at 3 a.m., and they'll do everything in the world for you, but might not be the best spiritual guide, right?
Right.
And then there's people spiritually that they want to know you in church and they want to talk Jesus with you, and they're right there. But if you're like, hey, let's go grab a glass of wine and just be, they're like, they don't know how to do that. So
Right.
we have to be very realistic about our expectations about what we're gravitating toward in our needs in life to start over each day. And be realistic with the people that are on the journey with us.
Right. I think, so many times we, if you want to succeed in something, you have a business coach or a health and wellness coach or a fitness coach, but, we don't think about having a spiritual coach. I mean,
Right.
it's only a matter of our life's eternity at stake. So why wouldn't we put as much effort and put the people in place, the right people in place that would help us on that journey as well?
So we would say that the first aspect of starting over each day is to have the right coach. Let's talk about Usain Bolt. I talked about him for a second. There's a team around somebody like that. I mean, yes, he has this God-given ability to be as fast as he is, but he just doesn't wake up every day and run the race. He trains, he prepares, he eats healthy, he does what he needs to do in order to be at the top.
Right. There's a lot of people standing behind that one person on the podium.
Exactly. And they're all, you find out that, I remember when my son went to college for his acting auditions, and everybody was really good. In high school, you're just part of select people and you can stand out because there's only so many.
Right.
You go to a university that specializes in acting, and then you go to the school, it's such a small amount that separates greatness from goodness,
Right.
which is a whole nother podcast. We'll talk
Right.
about it another time.
Right.
But to know that you have to train every day, that each day is starting over, good or bad, that when you wake up, what am I feeding my mind, body, and soul
Right.
in order to be able to be prepared for the journey in case when I fall, that it's going to be hard. And so that leads into the second reflection. We've talked a little bit about the people that are in our lives. Let's go a little bit deeper on your reflection on the second time that Jesus falls.
Well, the second time, again, he humbled himself before his Lord. And, one of the things that she suggests is to, get yourself in front of the Eucharist and ask for God's forgiveness, resolve to sin no more. But again, we do fall. So
Now, Millie, what does that mean? So some of the listeners that might be listening in, when she says, get in front of the Eucharist, if I'm not somebody who is really involved in church, or maybe I'm new to the faith, what does that really mean for the listener who wants to include that in their life, and how do they begin to do that?
Well, in many ways, for me, going to Mass is being in front of the Eucharist. Going to adoration is being in front of the Eucharist. You can be in front of God or your Jesus in many, many ways. It doesn't have to be a sacrament. So, I mean, it just as simple as, going for a walk in nature and having a conversation with God. Put yourself in his presence. So that way, you can stop, listen, pour your heart out. And there's such abundant grace released when you do that. And when you humble yourself, you resolve to not sin. And Faustina she says, I take great comfort knowing that my imperfections will vanish before your eyes and you will see only my love and humility.
Wow. Because we beat ourselves up more than we do. Why did I act that way? Why did I let that happen? Or why does this always, or sometimes we go the other way and it's like, why does this bad stuff always happen to me? God hates me. I can't, I never have any good luck.
Well, I had a great insight from my spiritual director the other day, and I was talking about, something I did that it wasn't less, it was less than perfect, and, you have to fight that whole perfectionist syndrome. And she said, you know what? Anything you do it for the Lord and put it away and be done with it. Don't look back at it.
Yeah, that's easier said than done, right?
Right. But I thought it was a great insight. She said, if you did it for the right reasons and you did it for the Lord, even if it wasn't perfect in your eyes, someone, you don't know the people you're going to affect.
Right. Well, and last podcast, we talked about spiritual warfare.
Right.
And this is the other aspect of that we do try to get into that mindset that I've fallen and maybe it was my fault, maybe it wasn't my fault, but I've fallen and I'm going to try to look past it. And then the devil was there saying, you are a joke.
Right.
Like, you really think that you can do this? You really think that you're good enough to proceed in your career or to be a great parent or friend? Like,
look at your past.
Yeah, you're not that good. Like, you fell because you're weak.
Right. And I think, we talked a little bit about, it's not about falling and reading a self-help book or, writing a gratitude journal. Sometimes it's just not that simple.
Right.
And so I don't want to sugarcoat this and say, it's a simple fix. Sometimes in our brokenness, we need to move into the pain, to see where is that lesson in the pain for me, if it's a big lesson, little lesson. But if we step away too fast from the pain and the brokenness, we're going to get that lesson again somewhere, somehow, in a different way, but it'll come back.
It's kind of like that, what do they say, the version of insanity or the definition of insanity is doing the same thing time and time again and expecting a different result.
Right.
And so if we fall, we shouldn't fall the second time for the same reason that we fell the first time, because we have to learn from that. But I also think that we need to know where we run. So if we say that one aspect of starting over is each and every day we're going to give our best. And then there's the other aspect of falling and having a setback. Now, a setback is a little bit different than a catastrophe. A setback would be, wow, that really hurt. I'm going to figure out how to get back up. Or that really hurt. I don't know how I'm going to move on. A catastrophe is, my world is over. Mm-hmm. I am worthless. Mm-hmm. I've destroyed myself, and I am never, ever going to be able to do this again. Mm-hmm. And we've watched runners finish races with pulled hamstrings. We've watched other competitors go back and get another runner and help carry them across the finish line. Michael Jordan had 4 other teammates on the court that he's playing with at every time. Even Jeff Gordon, as a racer, had other car members that would work together to help him be the best and win races. So even when we fall in such a catastrophic sense, we have to know that we were never, ever meant to do it alone.
Right.
And I think that one of the things for you and I that we've always been bonded by is our own personal setbacks that both occurred as we're growing in faith life, that you would have expected them maybe earlier in life, but then when they happened, it was kind of surprising.
Right.
So, I mean, share a little bit about your story and some of the things that you've overcome in order to maintain that.
Oh gosh. Well, I had a period in between 2008 and 2009 that was sort of my apocalypse time. That was
the same as mine. I think that there was something
part of it was
happening.
the economic downturn, and part of it was loss. in my life. I lost my dad, I lost my sister, and then due to the economic downturn, I ended up losing my business. I lost my house. In the process, I lost my marriage, and I lost literally everything I felt like I had worked for the last 20 years.
All right,
And,
that's the end of the show. I'm sorry that we started this discussion.
But no, really, but at that point was I had nothing else left but God, to turn to God. And it really ignited my faith. Again, I had wonderful friends, Christian friends around me that just, poured, the hope and faith and belief in me.
Yeah.
And returning to my faith and digging deep and humbling myself. I felt like, I kind of did my own thing for a long time, and God was like, how's that working for you? Again, to try my way now. So it was a whole reset. And honestly, it was the best thing that happened to me. I'm a different person. I feel like a better person. And I don't know that I would have changed anything that happened.
Well, and this is the important thing. I'm saying well a lot today. I don't know why. It's just, that's my thing today. But the important thing is that I've often heard people that when because you and I have similar things, and that same time period was a rough year, and same thing, I'd lost my business and was answering this call into God's ministry, but I thought it was supposed to be one way, and it was going to involve a lot of monetary and earthly things. And so I give that witness. You talk about your story. And then there's people who are like, I've never had anything catastrophic happen in my life, so I don't necessarily relate to that aspect of starting over. I've had bad things happen, but my conversion into a saint maybe isn't necessary because I haven't had this moment where God has knocked me down.
Yet.
Everybody's going to lose. I'm sure that Usain Bolt, who lost twice, I don't even know what those percentages are, and we don't have a long enough show to figure it out, but I don't know what those percentages are, but I can tell you that those 12 times that he probably lost, no matter when they were painful for him. And so, while you might not have catastrophe, you're still going to have setbacks. Or things are great in your life, and you're not including the Lord in your life, you're not including Christ. I can tell you that that's a setback if you're not including him as much as it is when you have a personal catastrophe, because things are infinitely greater when we allow God to be part of everything that we're doing. When we start each day with him leading, not just letting him in, but leading, it makes every day a little bit easier.
It does. And that's one of the things that, we've talked about before. I when this whole thing happened in 2008-9, I totally stopped watching the news. I still don't watch the news because it's so negative, and it's such a, it puts such bad, thoughts and process in your brain that you can just go down a dark rabbit hole. So I don't listen to the news. I begin the morning in prayer. I get God in first before anybody else has a piece of my brain, because you really need to set our intentions.
Right.
And we need to pray for the day. We need to pray for, what outcomes we might want. And the best way to do that is to just get God in first.
Sure. Well, and I could probably tell you that both Dan Rather and Katie Couric are not on the news anymore. And then there's this whole Matt Lauer thing that I won't even get into. But yeah, if you don't watch the news, I just thought I'd update you on a few of those things.
Well, I do see some of the headlines, but literally...
Hey, Greg, I don't live in a cave.
But, the funny thing is, people will, what's the last thing they do before they, our programming? We watch the news before we go to bed, and then turn it off and say, okay, night-night. Who's going to sleep with all that nonsense and, destruction and horrible things in your brain? It's just not a good system.
Yeah. Yeah, and that... What is it, again, what is it that you're fueling your body with, so that when you get to the starting line and you're starting over, what are you fueling your day with? So if you've had a setback, are you fueling it with hatred? Are you fueling it with bitterness? Or are you willing to fuel it with an energy that says, I didn't like the way that felt? I have 3 dogs. If they do something wrong and they have to be reprimanded, it's a learned behavior to say, well, I might not do that again. But if I sit when I come in the house and I get my paws wiped off, they give me this meaty treat. I like that. So when I'm going to start over next time, I'm going to sit right away. There's an obedience that begins to happen.
Right.
And it makes the process so much easier.
I think the key you said there is obedience. I mean, if you look at successful people, and I went through a whole period where I studied a lot of autobiographies and, did a lot of that research, and successful people have good habits. And sometimes their good habits are more important than their skill set. If you really have good habits in place, you have the right people around you, you have the right mindset, the skills you can learn. But the mindset, man, that takes a long time to get deep in your thought process.
Well, and even in Scripture. So it says in Scripture, this is Proverbs chapter 15, verses 21 to 23. It says, foolishness, easier said than read, foolishness brings joy to the one without sense, but a man with understanding walks the straight path. Plans fail when there is no counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. A man takes joy in giving an answer and a timely word. How good that is.
Amen.
That we shouldn't run back to the starting line just for the sake of starting over. If we lose a race, if we get knocked down, we have to have secret weapons. We have to know where to turn.
Right.
In your minute today, in Millie's minute, you have an answer to a secret weapon that you use in your life, and that is the good counsel that I think many other people are going to find. So I am going to get the timer up on the screen and also on my watch, and I am going to give you 1 minute to go now.
Dear Jesus, lay your wounded hand upon my weary head and teach me to have courage in the paths that I must tread. Bless me and bless those whom I love, and give us grace to see these crosses bravely borne by us will keep us close to thee. And if at times a shadow falls in unexpected ways, put your gentle hand in mine and guide me through the days. So bless my people one and all with thy protecting grace, and impart to them thy wisdom ere they meet thee face to face. That's out of my Catholic prayer book, and this is one of my secret weapons. Many of you that know me know I don't go very many places without this, but it's just a great companion for prayer. It has prayers about the Mass, communion prayers, daily prayers, prayers for adoration, prayers for confession, and a lot about our Catholic faith. So I use this a lot. There's prayers for priests, for petitions. So it's a great tool that I use and have with me at all times.
Amen. Under 1 minute, right then and there, you did it. I helped you a little bit, but you did it. But I like that you say this, because for me, if I think about the times that I've really been lost, and Millie, I still get lost.
Oh, I'm lost all the time.
Yeah, but I have days where I lose, and it hurts, and I don't know how tomorrow's. I don't even know what to do. I mean, I honestly mean that. As much as I try to pray, I can't think of a word. Suffering from clinical depression, I don't want to have a good thought. And it's a battle. It's a fight. What I love about the fact that you bring that up in your minute today is that part of the beauty of our faith is that we don't have to figure out everything on our own. We have all of the saints, all of the church fathers, and those people who have been saintly witnesses to give us a guidebook in order to follow prayer and in order to be led to Christ by simply reading their words and letting that soak in. If my heart doesn't have the right words, boy, to be able to go back to a prayer book like that, or if I've never prayed in my life before and I can pick that up and say, I don't know, there's a prayer in here about surrendering to the impossible. That's what I need.
Right.
What does that look like?
Right. And I wanted to share too, I mean, that's great. That's a great point. There's a lot of spiritual books, and I usually have a ton on my nightstand. But when I was talking about, Jesus falling and his example, the third times he falls, I wanted to share, there was a reflection that she said to Jesus. Jesus said to her, "You see, my child, what you are of yourself. The cause of your fall is that you rely too much on yourself and too little on me. But let this not sadden you so much. You're dealing with the God of mercy, which your misery cannot exhaust. Remember, I did not allot only a certain number of pardons." So, I mean, what a beautiful thing to think about when you're falling, that, we do have enormous grace
Do
from
you
our
think
God.
it's the weight of becoming full of ourselves that makes us fall?
Well, I know when my fall in particular happened, one of my falls, I had just said to my accountant maybe 6 months before, running a great salon is like a license to print money.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, I think, either somebody heard that or, but it was literally such a boastful, prideful statement that there was nowhere else to go but be humbled.
Yeah.
And I was humbled, and it was not a bad thing to be humbled.
Yeah. I think that's, listening to that and thinking about what are the ways that I've caused myself to fall?
Because I was taking credit for what was
Right.
God's gift to me.
Yeah. And you almost try to set the cross aside and to live like Christ. I mean, so this is the other aspect of starting over, right? No matter why you're listening to this podcast or what led you here, the simple fact is that if we are going to follow Christ, we are always going to have a cross to carry. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that the cross is always going to hurt. It doesn't mean that the cross is always going to weigh 1,000 pounds. But it does mean that we are going to carry a cross and suffer like Christ so that we can rise like Christ. And we can't rise unless we fall. We can't learn unless we've had something to learn from. And we can't preach and teach without a living example to share with others as to how we've done it. And you told me a little story about the joke before we started. And, we think alike. So,
Yeah.
But tell that story real quick about the woman in the well or the hole.
No, the woman in the hole. There was a story. I think one of the priests shared it at one of the homilies a few years back, and it's about a woman or man. There's a woman in a hole, and several people are walking by, looking down in the hole. A priest walks by and throws down a prayer. A doctor walks by and throws down a prescription. A guru walks by and throws down a mantra, and another woman walked by and she jumped in.
Jumps right in the hole.
And this woman goes, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I've been in this hole. I know how to get out."
Amen. That is, and I love that because that's who I want with me. Like when I fall, come down on the ground with me.
Right.
Right? Like let's
Right.
get in the trenches with me.
Right. And I think there's another story in a book by Father Albert Delp. He wrote Prison Writings, and he said, the best way to reach people is not with Christ, but first with their humanity.
Mm.
And I mean, he wrote that, 50, 60 years ago.
And sometimes we make that mistake in church, right? We try to
talk Jesus.
Yeah, right. Have you accepted Christ as your Savior? And somebody's like, "Well, yeah, I did that already. What now?"
Right.
I don't know. I go a little bit crazy sometimes when people say the things that they do, which come off as insensitive. Like if we're not telling somebody the how, or we're not willing to sit and minister fully, don't just throw out one-liners or inspirational insights of motivational quotes or scripture verses. I watch Tony Robbins and I'm like, Tony, would you say these things if you didn't have $100 million?
Right.
I know that you believe them, and I'm not knocking him because he's said great things that have motivated me, as many of those motivational speakers have. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. Is it more relatable for the guy who walks your walk and is in the same hole with you that's going to show you how to get out of it?
Right. And I think that, for me, that's the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone, but empathy is feeling sorry with someone. So to accompany that one, like I said before, don't just say, well, here's a self-help book, see you next week. Accompany them in their pain. It's never easy to go and do some reflection and do the whole pain process by yourself.
So if we're starting over, what are some of the how-tos? How do we begin to do this? And I would say that one of my first ones is that you need to actively sit down and journal about what you're learning in this process. You want to take this and do your best to turn it into a positive, and not just a positive sense of saying, "Oh, well, I guess bad things happen. I'm all right." It's not naive. It's to say, what did I learn about myself? Maybe what did I learn about the person who knocked me down? What did I learn about my dreams or the situation that I've had to start over from? And so I don't want to feel that way again. So what am I learning so it doesn't happen? And then that leads to the second part of that journal is, how do I grow from this? How do I readjust my training? Mm-hmm. How do I readjust the stance that I'm in when I start over? And how do I get ready to run the next race? So how am I going to grow from it?
Right. I think it's really important to have the right mindset. I just finished a book called Mindset, and the woman talks about the difference between having a closed mindset and an open mindset.
I haven't heard you talk about any of my books inspiring. We need to talk about that.
I will. But there's a process where when you're closed-minded, you think you have the knowledge, you have maybe a certain inherent skill set, and stretching yourself, you feel like you can't do because there's that risk of failure. But when you're open-minded, there's no failure, there's only learning. So if you can flip that switch and say, I'm not going to lose, the lesson because there's always a lesson to be learned. And I think even before we get to the point of, what can I learn, I pray for God to reveal to me what I'm supposed to be learning, because sometimes I don't even know what that is. I have to start even before you at, what the lesson is, to just reveal to me what the lesson is. So, in that I have,
and I think Asian spirituality does a great job of helping people learn that they're always in tune with nature. They're always in tune with what is happening, and you're it's the oneness. And I always do love that aspect of the culture and,
right.
And the spirituality.
And I think too, when I was in Ignatian spirituality, the concept of we are co-creators with God. He is our creator, but we are still part of the co-creation, and our obedience and our ability to say yes creates that creation and that co-creating process, which was kind of mind-blowing for me at first. It's like I can be a part of this in His will, because we all know how it turns out in our own will.
Yeah.
But that's a great thing to look at that oneness and understand, and have that fiat and say, yes, I'm going to surrender what I don't know or what I can't do to someone greater.
So, two aspects. What can I turn to if I'm in the hole right now and nobody's coming by to jump out with me? What are two things that I can do today to restart myself and start over?
Well, if I had to pick my top two, I would actually say spiritual direction. I think spiritual direction is a great resource, and it's like a relationship. I mean, you have to find the right director.
That's actually going to be our topic next week that we're going to talk about. What does it mean to have that spiritual coach who knows you better in a different way and is really open to the Holy Spirit.
Right. I mean, and talk about having your own answers. I mean, the spiritual direction is kind of a misnomer because they direct you back to God, who has your answers.
Faith-filled psychologist.
Yes. So that's a great one. And I think the Word, I always find such hope and relief and thanksgiving in the Word, whether I'm reading Psalms or the scripture of the day, or if I'm doing a study. I mean, we just are finishing up James. So much richness. The Bible is our salvation story. So it's a story of the Paschal mystery over and over, falling, rising, falling, brokenness, rising. It just, for me, it fills me with hope.
And I would say this. I would say that just remember that no loss should ever destroy your dignity, that you feel that you don't matter or that in some way you can't overcome what is happening to you. There is always a chance for you to start over, to run a different race, to play a different sport, to find a different way. So no matter where you're at in your brokenness, no matter where you're at in your loss, don't ever think that this is the end of the story. And likewise, if victorious right now and you're at the top of your game, don't think that there isn't a time coming when there's somebody who gets a lucky punch, or there's somebody that's training harder, or they're younger, or they have more time, whatever it might be, that there is somebody that can humble you in an instant, even if it's not the Lord. So you've got to continually think about who God made you to be, what is possible through God, and the ways that you can give Him the glory in the good and in the bad as you're looking to Him as that living example. So continue to start over each and every day. I just want to thank our sponsor. The Jess and Lilia Gifts from Above Foundation made this podcast possible today. We're still looking, as always, for sponsors for our other ministry endeavors and media events, as well as future podcasts. So if you'd like to become a donor or for more faith-filled inspiration, you can always go to faithandreallife.com, listen to other podcasts, or see what's new in the ministry. So that's my public service announcement. Millie, any last final thought?
As long as you're still on this good green earth, there's someone that needs your gifts.
True that. I'm going to leave it at that because I can't even top it. So for Millie Prebel, I'm Greg Wasinski. Thank you for joining the Faith and Real Life podcast. Start over today, make it better than it was yesterday, and make sure that anybody you see along the way that's laying on the ground, you're willing to put your hand down and help them start over too. God bless you.